I believe that My Hero Academia had the potential to become the perfect shonen. It had an entertaining world, a compelling setup, and a fairly compact format, looking at you One Piece, but it ultimately fell short in some aspects like its vast cast or the ending, which we'll try to analyze and fix. Hello comrade, my name is Mahis. Come, get yourself a beverage and sit down with me. We got a blueprint to revise. Let's begin with the 50-50 issue, the one I can argue for and against, since on paper it makes sense, yet the execution could have been better. The side characters, probably the most divisive topic outside shipping, which we'll also kinda talk about. The main concern is simple. A good chunk of characters barely participate in major events and have a little backstory / anything that makes us care about them. Konoha 12 basically with a few more faces. Except that I don't think it was that bad, simply because by the end of the series, almost everybody did something important, including students outside 1A class. Even Mineta was more useful than Tenten, for example, as he's pretty handy at restraining defeated villains like we've seen a few times throughout the show. I mean, in comparison to the top 5 of the class, he is a walking definition of an extra, but as we all know, comparison is a thief of joy. Not everybody is born or made equal. You can't expect somebody whose quirk is just one extra appendage to go toe-to-toe with the big bad, and My Hero Aka handles it somewhat decently, giving everybody a role they can fill based on their abilities. I know a thing or two about choosing the right character for the right role, as I had a lot of practice with Raid Shadow Legends, who once again supported our channel and brought presents to celebrate an important milestone. Raid is a cross-platform collection RPG that is filled with activities like big bosses, PvP, and even a campaign. My personal favorite is team building, especially for the arena battles where you put your characters against other players. To get them, you need shards that can be earned through challenges and other means, as well as through promo codes, which I'll happily provide. These two guys I just got aren't exactly what I'm looking for, but they'll do fine to upgrade my main squad. This dude, however, let's see, Old Grukus decreases the attack of my enemies and applies healing reduction, so if I make him go first with some artifacts, he'll be hella useful. If you've ever thought of checking it out, now is the best time to start playing Raid, as with its 6-year anniversary, you'll get a ton of giveaways that will allow you to quickly rise among its 5 million active users. By downloading the game with my link, you'll receive the epic hero Zargala, one of the hardest hitting AoE champions, as well as a bunch of other useful items. Moreover, there are 4 promo codes for new players to choose from to get a legendary that best fits your playstyle. Supreme Galak with Supreme 6, Sun Wukong with MONKEYKING, Alice the Wanderer with GETALICE, and Loki the Deceiver with GETLOKI. Remember, these champions are only available after downloading via my custom link or the QR code, and you have 48 hours to redeem them. Both new and existing players can also get one more promo code, Gameleap, that gives 1 full energy, 10 XP brews, and 100,000 silver. Once you're all set and got into the swing of things, find me in our clan so we can be legends together. In the real world, not every firefighter carried a mom and an infant out of a burning building, yet we don't boo them saying, "Elf firefighter, why did you even become one?" etc, etc. It's stupid, just like expecting everyone in the cast to be as useful as the MC. However, this is where my defense starts to run out because of how it was handled. Take Monoma, Shinzo, and Hatsume. They ended up being quite important despite the fact that their classes, even 1B, were left behind. That was done to expand the school and show us that heroes don't come exclusively from this one particular group we happen to follow. There had to be other outstanding individuals, and in order to incorporate them organically into the narrative, the author had to give them some exposition that was different from the main cast. There's no need story-wise to develop the support class as much, since the primary reason for their existence is Hatsume Mei, the genius eccentric inventor we all know and love. But not every character was lucky enough to receive this build-up, and as a result, when their big moment came, we were like, wait, metamorphs were still treated that badly in mass, and Shoji had this backstory all along? We did see this before, obviously, with the Spinner and the clan, yet the actual extent of this issue was never shown, and if anything, we saw people getting along rather well despite their appearances. This could have been a grand subplot about prejudice, discrimination, and good old racism spanning through arcs, instead of a one-and-done speech during a riot. It's not bad per se, it's underwhelming, and Deku's classmates aren't the only ones suffering from this issue. The Starry Stripe had one of the most badass introductions in the story. Hell, this was one of the most American shit I've seen in my 20 years of watching anime, with the only thing missing being a Van Damme split using fighter jets instead of trucks. How was she used? To sprinkle a bit of irony and kamikaze the Japanese supervillain, taking some quirks down with her. Don't get me wrong, it's the heroic sacrifice at its finest, but it came and went as a random stiffy, leaving everyone confused and unsatisfied. Being such a major character in terms of the world's lore, Starmite needed a much bigger role with more screen time to not feel like a slightly more powerful cannon fodder. You have to plant seeds and fertilize the soil if you want to have any hope of growing a fruitful plant. That's why shows like One Piece and Attack on Titan stand among the top shonens of all time, as the biggest developments in their stories feel satisfactory due to foreshadowing and proper build-up. Speaking of which, sometimes the Chekhov's gun that My Hero Academia presents ends up not firing at all, and the worst offender in this department is romance. For the love of Yutaka Nakamura, would the shonen authors finally grow some balls and give us at least one continuous relationship between two people that doesn't go, here's a crush, one is oblivious, and boom, they're suddenly together after the series wraps up? Why do you think there is a demographic crisis in Japan due to people fucking around instead of fucking? Because your media keeps feeding the public examples of how not to interact with the opposite sex and what not to do when you like somebody. Oh, I fell in love with this dude, but we're so busy and I'm not really sure. Maybe if I saw Naruto doing something with Hinata's confession, I wouldn't be sitting here alone in the basement making anime videos. Projection. Seriously though, what is the point of putting these minor and major interactions into the story if you don't follow up on them whatsoever? It was actually pretty cool seeing the #1 unpredictable ninja and the Byakugan princess finally getting together, with even the fandom largely accepting it. Why? Because it was there all along and everybody saw where this was going. It's not like no one has done it before, and there are no examples you can draw inspiration from. Plenty of older shonen had decent romance, with the more recent case being Full Metal Alchemist. Ed and Winry went through one of the most believable and wholesome love arcs, where neither had to outright say I love you in order to start acting like it. They were about the same age as Midoriya and Uraraka, as well as lived through an equally stressful time period, so why did the latter, even after internally accepting their feelings, not pursue them? I know that in the chapter 341 they ended up doing something I can't really show on YouTube, but that was 8 not fucking years later. Come on, you seriously tell me that two people who went through so much shit together and risked their lives for each other, since day one mind you, didn't become extra close when they literally live in the same building? You could say Mahi is. This is a shonen, not a romance anime. No, it's not. But I didn't put these scenes there, so why does the author insult my intelligence by not developing parts of the narrative they themselves created? This would have added another level to the story, making the conflict that much more personal than just good versus evil. Denki had this moment where he found courage to fight villains due to a specific person he wanted to protect, and it was much more relatable than saying, I want to save everyone. You don't have to write an elaborate series of back and forth scenarios, as it's indeed not a romance-oriented story. Just add these two spending a bit more time together, show them chatting in the background, make the others tease them a little, and after the dust settles, give them a moment for a heart-to-heart without others interrupting them. Please stop this cliche. It's not funny, it doesn't benefit anyone, just stop. Before we continue to the more serious flaws, I want to quickly address my little pet peeve that has to do with time frames in the show. No way they've constructed the coffin in the sky and other high-tech stuff so quickly. I understand that with the help of quirks, heroes can erect an entire cluster of dorms for the students, yet to make a floating island with an intricate system of mechanisms that move around and resupply the destroyed parts in what feels like a few weeks is very unlikely. I don't think Hirokoshi has ever worked in construction, so he might not know just how much time even simple wiring can take. This thing is an incredibly large structure with complicated machinery taking up to probably 60-70% of its volume, making it an impossibility for such a small group of superhumans even considering their space-age technology. It's not really detracting from the story, but I would have preferred these marvels of engineering to take at least a month or two to create. Alright, on to the meat and potatoes. Death. Never have we seen this problem, and here it is again. A complete lack of depth in a show about a superhuman war for whatever reason. Actually, the reason, or at least part of it, is pretty simple and lies in the fandom, who is known to issue death threats to various authors after they kill off certain characters. Not gonna elaborate as it will include major spoilers for other shows, so you can easily Google it. That aside, it's one of the strangest habits of a lot of writers which almost never benefits the story. Like, what's the purpose of keeping Toya alive? We already had a moment where they all talked, cried, and apologized, so what else is there to do? Ask what food he likes? By now you've established that he's a dead man walking, gave him a half-and-half quirk, and even a type of redemption. Let him go, for crying out loud! It's over! You're just creating redundancy that leads nowhere and stains those important moments. Same thing with Gran Torino. He doesn't do anything after he gets hospitalized due to an All Might punch through the gut. If he died, Dark Deku arc would have made more sense, since the death of a mentor would have definitely messed with Midoriya's head, who now has a real example of people dying for him. Well, Sir Night-Eye kinda did, but the circumstances were a bit different. That's why I love Nemuri's death. That came out wrong. That's why I love how Nemuri's death was handled, because just like in an actual war, she met her end in the middle of the battlefield without any glory or drama. In some ways, her death was much sadder than the others, as there she was a minute ago and now she is no more. Stripe and Stars, for instance, was there for like 2 episodes, yet her disintegration lasted several times longer than Midnight's, who was there from the very beginning. The only revival I can accept is Bakugo pulling through thanks to the combined efforts of Genist and Edgeshot. It makes sense that a perfect stitching machine was able to patch him up, and a guy who can fold his body in whichever way he wants sacrifice himself to replace some irreparable tissue. I can't even call this an Aspull really, since he has advanced knowledge of human anatomy, which was demonstrated before on several occasions. However, Kamihara should not have survived the ordeal. This was another opportunity to highlight how the previous generation is willing to surrender everything in order to protect the future and support the new heroes, but it turned out as just another case of I'll do something that should kill me, yet stay alive because reasons. On the topic of reasons, the next issue we have is All for One. I'm content with him practically eisening Tomura Shigaraki, as it's in his style of sowing seeds that might sprout a good pawn, especially if it's a one-for-all's relative who he certainly would have found out about. Although Hirakoshi sometimes went a bit too far with how much the Demon Lord planned, cause let's be honest, for someone who prepares so many things far in advance, he makes a lot of rookie mistakes. Look at Overhaul. Even if you thought that Tenko would have become a better villain without the reconstruction part of it, why wouldn't he give it to Garaki, who is a perfect candidate for this ability? Maybe he would have died of old age before he'd figure out how to use it, yet it could have also gone to one of many friends Quirk Daddy often boasts about. Or what? With all your international reach, you don't have a single trustworthy person to aid your most important subject? Well then recruit Shisaki, you moron, as you did with so many others. How can this smart, experienced, and quirk-savvy mastermind just let go of one of the strongest powers in the story is incomprehensible. Trust me, I've spent hours rolling in bed trying to understand it to no avail. But in doing so, I came up with something that would have made All for One and his plot a bit more interesting. You see, there are other issues with him, like one of the reasons for merging with One for All is Shigaraki Sr. wanting to resurrect his brother. How often do we have to do this? Orochimaru, Zeref, people from FMAB, don't give me this sentimental crap. Keep him as a selfish overlord who wants to take over the world. Anyway, the other reason for stealing One for All is to complete his original quirk, which in turn will allow him to enhance other superpowers and stockpile more of them. It works as a motivation, yet with All for One already having very little limitations, it doesn't seem too crucial. What if his own power only worked on the first, maybe second generation quirks, and he needed One for All to be able to steal more complex powers like the New Order? That would have explained why he can't do anything with Overhaul, minus recruiting him obviously, and would have given him a bit of a weakness and a sense of urgency, since the latest generation of quirks is so powerful now that some of them can single-handedly put up a decent fight. It was his plan all along to complete himself and then steal big quirks, so it wouldn't have changed the story that much, but the mighty star showing up early would have thrown a more significant wrench into his plans and made their fight harder for all for Shiggy, since she would have been worried about him stealing the quirk. Moreover, the big bad raising people with particularly destructive abilities instead of stealing them would have been much more justified by wanting to balance out his own first generation underpoweredness with modern capable henchmen. Plus, him supporting the author of Quirk Singularity Theory would have gotten an extra layer as a plan B of sorts, and maybe even explained why he stopped pursuing Erasure since he realized he can't steal it. Lastly, and very appropriately, I want to talk about the ending. To be frank, even though Amahi's Deku losing his quirk and becoming a teacher doesn't bother me as much as it does to realize that I've been lied to. If we go back to the very first chapter, it clearly says this is the story of how I became the greatest hero, which is a little different from the last chapter that goes, this is the story of how we all became the greatest heroes. Mathematically speaking, there is nothing wrong, as Midoriya is one of the greatest heroes, yet it's not what I was expecting. The greatest in my mind means someone who can't be surpassed, unlike the number one, for example. They had to have dealt with some unprecedented threat in the most heroic way possible, and to me, that was Midoriya sacrificing himself to end All for One once and for all. I was fully expecting him to die, as such an honorable title can only be granted post-mortem. Even All Might wasn't called the greatest, so whoever that title went to had to go a step beyond. You can say it's my problem for imagining this grand ending and then getting disappointed with the actual conclusion, but again, I didn't put the word greatest there, nor did I change these lines. If it was simply, this is the story of how I became a hero and we became heroes respectively, there would have been way less confusion with no changes to the plot. The other component to the ending issue is Deku's life after the war. In plain terms, it was like a cheek slap that said, well, the dream is over, go back to reality. Even though it was our main character who returned to a normal life, the viewer felt the same disappointment that, after everything we've been through, he is now a simple teacher watching his friends live his dream. The fact that they all chipped in for a hero suit didn't help either, as it undermined the final message of, you don't need superpowers to make a difference. If we witness Midoriya being responsible for programs that help people with troublesome quirks to fit in, or some other activity that benefits the society as a whole, the ending would have been more satisfying due to our savior not fading into obscurity. By no means do I say that My Hero Academia is a bad show. Hell, I don't know whether I like it less than FMAB or not, since the former has a much better take on villains, for instance. It's a generic shonen, well made, but still with a pretty standard formula, which is a shame, because if it has stepped outside its comfort zone by incorporating what we've just talked about, it could have come closer to perfecting the genre. Iwasai. Mahi is trying to do the impossible into the microphone. Don't forget to give Raid a try with my link, as you do get some awesome starting bonuses, and have a great, whatever time of the day you have. Until next time, cheers.